We've got Julie Cullivan, the CIO of ForeScout, and Ben Fried, the CIO of Google, and we're going to have a quick little conversation here about their companies and about what it means to be a CIO right now in 2018. So maybe right off the bat, Julie, I don't know if everyone in the audience is familiar exactly with ForeScout, so could you just quickly give us an introduction of your company and what you do there?
Yes, actually it's interesting because it was almost a year ago to the day that we went public here in this very spot. So we are a network security provider. We focus on device visibility, intelligence, and control. And the problems that we really solve are around the explosion of the number of devices and operating systems that are out there that are now connected. We focus on all these cloud connections that organizations have coming into their environments, as well as this convergence of IT and OT, where all these systems that had traditionally had been air-gapped and sort of separate are now coming online, and the need to protect those devices.
Okay, and then Ben, Google Alphabet is a octopus. What part of the company exactly you?
I'm not sure I would have chosen that metaphor, but I think I understand what you mean. So I'm Google's Chief Information Officer. I'm responsible for the technology that people at Google use to get their work done, is probably the simplest way of stating it. That includes all the line of business systems, personal technology, collaboration, video conferencing. It sounds a lot like a CIO job, and I'm also the primary, or in many cases, sole technology provider for most of the other, what we call the other bets, the other non-Google companies.
Well, that was really my question, really. Are you in the core advertising business or cloud and other bets as well?
Yeah, so cloud is part of Google. I'm the CIO for all of Google, which includes all of the lines of business, consumer hardware, ads, search, geo, cloud, and so on. And most of the other bets, although the Alphabet structure gives the CEOs of the other bets the autonomy to kind of go whatever way they want when it comes to choices about how they run their businesses.
Okay. You know, we talk a lot, or we read a lot about the changing role of the CIO, how it's, you know, a real C-suite executive these days rather than maybe a glorified systems administrator in the past. But I'm wondering, I'm just curious what that actually looks like at your individual companies. Different companies, you know, run things different ways. So, Julie, maybe you could talk about what your role day-to-day actually looks like.
Yeah, well, so first, I mean, I think in some of the conversations we had leading up to this, my experience has always been on the business side. My very first job in IT was as a CIO. So I really do think the role is evolving and changing, and that need to really understand what the business is trying to do, and being intimate with the, you know, not just the technology it needs to enable what it's trying to do, but really the problems they're trying to solve. So for me, I've always seen the role as I don't want to say different, because I think for years CIOs have always been told you need to be in touch with the business and you're here to support the business, but I think it's becoming more and more real. So I think the ability to sort of influence conversations, I think there was a comment earlier about order takers, right? It's sort of really trying to change that dialogue to, hey, what are you really trying to do? And let us help you come up with the ways that we might be able to help you support that. So I think it's very real. And I mean, the last two roles I've had, it's a seat at the table, CEO level type thing. It's a much smaller organization than Google, but I think more and more that there's recognition you have to really be a true business leader.
So sort of proactive rather than reactive.
Well, and be able to ask the questions, right? Not just take the inputs, but to be able to really ask those hard questions about, is this really going to solve the problem?
Is that sort of your experience as well, Ben? Or?
Well, I was actually reflecting as Julie was speaking about the similarities and differences between her role and mine. You could not accuse me of having been a business person first, I'd say, or it would be ill-advised to do that. Lifelong computer scientist and software engineer. I held a number of technically oriented leadership positions in IT prior to coming to Google. I worked at Morgan Stanley actually for 14 years, and I worked on the technology for Google's IPO from the syndicate side, in fact, among, I guess there's a plaque here somewhere about the Google IPO, which reminded me of that. But, you know, at Google, starting with the founders always viewed IT as an engineering discipline, like the areas where, you know, like making our products, IT is fundamentally, has engineering at its core. And although it has many differences from making products in many cases, there are a lot of similarities as well. And for me, they were looking for someone who was conversant in being able to manage software delivery and construction and so on. So, you know, my team does, it's not a small team, but we do some of everything that CIOs do, or CIOs organizations do, but there's definitely, I would say, because there's a capacity to be able to build things and to be able to build the unbuyable, to be able to solve problems that we can't go to the market for, we end up doing a fair amount of that.
Right. What is sort of the biggest challenge or struggle that each of you is dealing with right now in your roles?
I mean, I think the overall struggle, and I think it's been a struggle for a long time, is just keeping up with the demand, right? There's so many technologies and so many things that the business wants to consume. How do you really, help team with them to prioritize what's most important? But, all the traditional security, integration, data, right? All these same challenges that have been around for years continue to be challenges even in sort of this new world, right, of cloud and all these things. It doesn't solve some of those fundamental things that you have to be concerned about and continue to stay focused on. And typically, the CIO is more attuned to the need to focus on those things, and the rest of the organization may think, hey, that stuff just needs to happen, right? How do we get these other things going?
So there's a bureaucratic challenge there sometimes. So.
I think it's just, everybody's got their priorities that they're going to try to drive, right? And rarely are some of the priorities that I think I need to think about and worry about are going to be on their list of top priorities.
So for some of us, I think the biggest struggle as CIOs is choosing only one thing to be our biggest struggle. That didn't land very well, did it? So
focus.
Okay, yeah. So listen, the way I would position it is that CIOs sit in a really interesting place right now because there is more opportunity to transform our businesses through technology than ever before. I mean, think about things that have happened in the technology sphere over the last 5 years: cloud computing, mobile everywhere, the advancement of ML, like just IoT and software as a service, to name just a few things that come to the top of the mind. So the tools we have in the toolbox to really transform and improve the enterprises that we're in are more powerful than they ever were before. And yet that puts even more pressure on us to deliver what Julie was talking about, which is to actually be able to fully deliver on that transformation. Right, you need to, I think the big new struggle for CIOs is understanding how to combine those transformational technologies with creating a role that allows you to transform, right, enables you and charges you with helping the business you're in transform.
I mean, both of you are in technology companies, and I'm sure the role, maybe it's easier within a tech company to say, tech is important, not necessarily, but I mean, do you want to respond to that?
I only respond because my experience is it's almost harder because everybody believes they're smarter than you and could solve that problem much more quickly.
You heard that too, huh?
Yeah.
Every day. Usually in their mind, everything could take 2 weeks. That's the time frame that always seems to come back. So I actually find, but again, I've only worked in technology companies being in the Silicon Valley, so I'm not sure I know any different, but I believe sometimes that it's really tough. And particularly in security, the companies that I've worked for often have a lot of folks that are really, really experts in security, yet they really don't want to take the job of having to secure the organization, so they have a lot of great advice for you all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. Being an IT leader in a technology company, you are the beneficiary of an infinite amount of free advice. I would say that is definitely true. And I think Julie and I share this thing that we work with people who, in some cases, actually are the world experts on some topic. They might be if one of the inventors of the Unix operating system is commenting on how my team built some piece of software that runs on the Unix operating system, we can't kind of just show the hand, right? They might actually be. So, but I would say, there's lemonade to be made from these lemons as well. And one of the things that we do, all these things perhaps with mixed success, but one thing that's really important is to try to actually encourage contribution, not in the form of, oh, you said you can do it in 2 weeks, so do it in 2 weeks, but more be open about how the project is structured. In the case of Google, we try to do things like actually create 20% project opportunities. So if you see, one of the things that my team has benefited from a lot is that many people are really excited about the tools that we're providing, and they're important to them. And so what we try to do is channel that into making the tools better in some way or other. And you have to constantly work at that, but you can have great success with it. And I think that that's kind of a sign of the future yet to come. So many people coming into all workplaces now are capable of actually contributing to the work of IT. I think a challenge for us is how do we harness that and not let that turn into CIOs feeling like they're holding the barbarians back at the gates.
Right. So the tech adoption is a good thing within the organization, obviously. Yeah. I'm sure the challenges, though, are different for CIOs at non-tech companies, legacy companies that maybe have always looked to tech as a way to purely just to cut costs or what's efficient rather than business transformation. What would be some advice that you would have for technology leaders within companies that are not tech companies and maybe don't quite know how to deal with technology yet?
Well, I mean, I guess for me, I am a believer that focusing just on the technology is not the right approach, right? Because there's so many things out there that in theory can solve a problem, but only if you've really thought about the problem statement. You've really been willing to go back and look at the process and the root cause of issues, because I do worry a little bit that there's so much available and it's so easy to consume that you end up with a proliferation of things that maybe didn't actually get to the root of the issue. So, I mean, my advice is leverage technology as much as you can, but not out of context of, the process, the data, all the other things that you want to make sure you've thought through before, because technology by itself will not typically solve the problem. So it's making sure as you approach these things that, hey, we're probably the toughest buyers out there, right? But, making sure that you don't fall in love with the dashboard or whatever it is, and make sure that you really think about, how you're going to get there, because it's change management. There's all these other things that have to happen to make this technology really do what it's capable of doing. So I guess that's my thought.
Two thoughts. One, something, Julie, that you said that I just wanted to comment on, which is, software as a service in the cloud means that anyone can be a technology decision maker, anyone can be a technology consumer, but it's really only in IT organizations that you actually have an understanding of the risk and compliance issues that affect technology adoption and that really need to gate it. And I think no matter what kind of company you're in, you need to make sure that those capabilities are developed in your organization, and as a CIO, you're putting them front and center with the rest of the C-suite as just a way of protecting the company and bringing professional management to a realm where technology can come from anywhere. Point number one. Point number two is that I think one of the things that we've seen a lot of luck with, and I think this is another facet of what Julie was talking about, is what some people call using design thinking or other people call user-centric design as a way of creating a different conversation about what IT should be doing, even in an environment where cost-cutting, a legacy business where cost-cutting and so on is the mantra, right? And I'll give you one very specific example of something we did that was really illuminating, right? So most companies, every company wants to or does automate travel and expense reporting, right? It's a no-brainer. Finance needs you to do that, right? But we decided we had UX researchers and lead a true design thinking, user-centered design approach to what's actually going on. And you talked about understanding the bigger problems. What's actually going on? Does a travel and expense report stand on its own, or is it actually part of some bigger, more important set of activities on the parts of our employees that we need to really understand and respond to? So, and in our experience, T&E was mostly done for travel. Travel was for business trips. And actually what we discovered was that there was an enormous amount of opportunity in making the experience of planning business trips faster, better, more efficient, right? So we look deeper. If you actually really understand where the person needs to go and why they need to go there and how they're going to get there, you can make better suggestions, make sure they're using corporate rates on their flights and they're kind of booking the right hotels. You can make those paths super easy to do, right? Because you know that they're traveling, you can do things like block out their calendar, you can suggest people they should meet with in the remote office. You can, if you know they were traveling, you can, if they're scanning receipts, you can immediately have them go into a place where you assume that they'll be for expenses. And then at the end of it all, actually, if you really do that well, not only have you saved, in our case, we've saved, say, 3 or 4 hours per trip in planning, which is time people can use to actually do their work. But then you actually don't really need an expense report because you kind of knew where all the expenses came from anyway. So I think that's an example of bringing new thinking, even in traditional environments, and to how technology can change things.
That, but yeah. I mean, in terms of looking forward then, we know sort of where we're coming from and where we're now and the struggles that you're dealing with right now, but a bit of an open-ended question, but sort of what is your vision for what this role could look like or how you'd like to see these things evolve?
I'm going to let you go.
Okay, well, I'll start by saying something obvious, and some other maybe slightly less obvious things will emerge. So I've believed for a long time that and I don't say this just because my company has a horse in the race, although we do, cloud computing is truly transformational for CIOs, right? So I don't have a data center team. I don't have a networking team. I don't worry about those things at all. I am about to complete the journey of moving the small amount of premises software that we had completely into the cloud, right? And not worry about managing any iron that I bought from Dell or HP or any of the other traditional manufacturers. And I'm surprised at how many CIOs I meet who agree with me that that's the destination, but aren't yet in a position of being able to get there or just imagine how different their life would be. As if you're really, for the most part, companies tend not to value infrastructure. They value the absence of infrastructure. They value the failure of infrastructure in bad ways, right? But, oh, we've got a data center and it works is kind of a short-lived hurrah. Whereas, so what this means, the reason why I mentioned that is that I think there's this opportunity now to really think about the IT organization investing, sorry to use a technical term, in the top of the stack, right? The things that users can touch and experience and matter so much more. And I think everyone agrees it's only a matter of time before almost all IT shops can get there. And I would just urge accelerating, I would urge accelerating the path there because there's a huge difference between having to worry a little bit about data centers and networking and all the kind of conventional infrastructure stuff and not having to worry about it at all. That gap is enormous.
Yeah, I think I feel very lucky in the last two roles that I've been in that the organizations were more or less in, the term born in the cloud in the sense that the vast majority of things that we're doing, we were able to do that way because they were all new services. Not a lot of legacy, not trying to get off something onto something. It's sort of the way it's been. I think for me, I am most, sort of excited about, AI, machine learning, those types of capabilities. But coming from a small organization, the way that I can take advantage of these things is by, these cloud solutions and services that are being offered by new companies, right, where I really get the benefit of all this crowdsourced data helping me to be able to do things better in my organization. So I'm excited about that, and I think more and more that's going to be where things are headed, but understanding that not every organization has the data these guys have, right? So it's like, how do you take advantage of those types of technologies by, leveraging data across a bunch of companies, right, to be able to then benefit you in some way?
Yeah, if I had a second answer, I would say ML is amazing opportunity, requires a lot of investment and a lot of expertise to use really, really well, but you can do things with it that it gives you tools we just didn't have before. They're really powerful.
Right. Well, I think there's going to be a whole section on AI and ML, so I don't want to steal the thunder there, but now that we've brought it up a little bit, as a reporter, we're very skeptical about all these things. There's a lot of AI washing, that's been going on. Where are we, for, maybe not for Google, maybe not even for, ForeScout, but for the typical CIO, is this something that they should be spending a lot of time thinking about? Or should they just let the technology develop a little bit more to a point where it's more real? Well,
I think they have to be thinking about it for sure. But I think that's my point, right? That initially when you start to hear about, what you can do with these technologies, as you start really looking at your own organization and saying, how does this really apply to me? Like real examples of where it's going to add benefit, you start to realize you need a lot of data, right? Yeah. For it to really benefit you. And an organization our size, right, is not going to have big data, right? We're awesome and we're growing fast, but we really need to have these proven use cases that are out there where somebody's doing these types of activities on behalf of a larger pool of data that really then come back and benefit you. So I think everyone needs to be thinking about it, and then you need to find those use cases that really apply to your environment and where they're going to bring back value. But yeah, with anything, these things need to mature, right? But you need to find those one or two niches where it can actually help you optimize or those types of things.
Yeah, my advice would actually be, it is early days, you're absolutely right, and ML is spread very unevenly across the IT industry. I talk to lots of great organizations that are doing nearly nothing with it, some very large, right, and others that are. But I think that's an era of opportunity, and I would really suggest that CIOs think about building, to the degree that you have some amount of discretionary budget and effort, to build some staff genuine expertise. Like, let me give you 2 examples of real wins that we've had with ML in areas that I think you all could relate to. Number one, like, how many of you are CIOs who have a ticketing system your team worries about? And any of us, do you know what workflow ticketing systems? I'm not the only one. I've got one. And so, I mean, and we've kept every ticket we've ever produced in the 20 plus years of the company, right? And turns out that's great training data for ML. And now the ML classifier can actually route tickets super effectively. One of the big problems we always have is classifying and routing tickets to the right work queue or managing the workflow. ML actually does that really, really well and allows the troubleshooters and resolvers to actually resolve and troubleshoot and not worry about whether the thing is in the right place. So that's kind of one thing that's been a huge benefit and a huge productivity for an area. Those are always areas where we're really concerned about improving productivity, right? And then the other area that I'd say this is kind of a more, well, maybe only a Google thing, is we use ML during the performance review season to suggest peers for you to select to do peer reviews of you. And the ML does that by looking in things like public calendars and in shared documents to see who you collaborated with on documents, and in the source code control system to see who you've been working with in source code and things like that. And it's gotten very good. Now, to be clear, it's not making decisions for you, it's making suggestions. And actually, that turns out to create more good data, because when you reject the suggestion, that helps train the ML as well. But that's something that people are actually really happy with. No one is like, does anyone like performance review season? I don't think so. But this is one of these things where actually now the ML is making the tool kind of help you get through the process more than just taxing you with the process.
So, yeah, as long as the ML is not doing my performance review, but maybe that'll be better than my boss doing. I don't know, which is something that you see.
You never know.
I think IBM they have Watson for performance review, and we don't need to get into
we have
Watson,
managers for performance review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I just in our last minute and 40 seconds here, I wanted to ask about the landscape, in particular this massive deal we saw yesterday, and I don't know what you're able to say about it, but I'm curious were you surprised? What were your thoughts when you saw the IBM acquiring Red Hat yesterday for $34 billion?
So we said this is on the record, right?
It's all on the record.
I see these things, and having been in tech for many years and seen lots of different acquisitions, I see things like this, and sometimes I get concerned about what does this really mean for the future of that technology stack, because I've seen a lot of these happen where really good technologies end up not really having the future that one had hoped. So I'm always curious about these things, as to, everyone always says it's going to be separate and on its own and all those kind of things, but I think it'll be interesting to see sort of how their future and their vision rolls out in this type of model. But again, that's just having bought lots of technologies that end up getting acquired by large organizations that suddenly they don't have the future that they once had. Yeah, right. I'm trying not to use the words I used earlier. They weren't swear words or anything, but.
Yeah. So maybe a little more distant perspective, we don't do much business with Red Hat, for example. But what I saw in the write-ups was IBM saying they're doing this because they believe in hybrid cloud, right? The future of hybrid cloud. I don't know what this means, but I do think hybrid cloud is actually incredibly important. And I see my teams are already embracing these technologies that enable hybrid cloud. So I think it's a great endorsement of the idea that hybrid cloud is actually really, really important. But I think, to your point, we have to see what actually comes of this that actually changes the landscape, right?
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. And thank you all for participating.
Thank you.
Back to Alex.
Thank you.